2023 at George Street. This morning, we're going to be covering numerous issues. As you know, it's been a busy couple of months for Barbados. Um, Many things have been happening on different levels, and we have a panel of very eager and learned sportspersons to enlighten you today. So I don't want to delay the proceedings, but before I do introduce them, I would also, on behalf of all of us, add to the sentiments of our General Secretary in extending our condolences to the Leacock family. That family, as you know, would have been integral in the entertainment industry in this country. And not only are we mourning the loss of Carolyn, but we also are mourning the loss of Janice, who was a long-standing member of Sing Out Barbados, one of their frontline women for very many years. So the family has been dealt a tremendous blow, and we just want to add to the voice of the nation in extending our condolences once again, because our General Secretary has also done so on behalf of the party officially. So this morning, we do have our president, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, who is in the center. To his right, we have Paul Gibson. To his left, we have Melissa Savory Gittins. And to my right, we have Kimar Stewart. Now, our discussions this morning will range from health to the economy, as well as education. But we will be guided by your questions as well. So you do not have to be inhibited in asking questions on any matter this morning. So with that, I would just wish to have our president start the proceedings.
Good morning, Barbadians. Good morning, comrades. Good morning to the media. I just want to wish everyone a happy new year and blessings from the party and from the DLP party and from my family as well to all of you. I hope that you had a really, really good Christmas and had some rest, and that we can start the new year in a robust and meaningful and a productive way. I also want to join Irene and the General Secretary on behalf of the Democratic Labour Party family to express deepest condolences to the Leacock family on the passing of Carolyn Leacock. I would have grown up listening to Carolyn's music and that of her family in my household, and the spooge and the sweet songs. And Carolyn defined a music tradition for many generations and for Barbadian women, and lots of women and musicians emulate her and her style, and she definitely was a national songbird. I was telling my friend this morning, one of my favorite Carolyn songs is The Clock. I probably wouldn't quote the lyrics of The Clock. If you know The Clock, you would know one of the lyrics. But one of the other songs that Carolyn gave us is Just As Long As We Have Love, or A Love and a Song. And the line that I want to quote from there is, just as long as we have love, shoulders we can lean on. If we fall, just as long as we have love, we have it all. And with that, again, deepest condolences to the Leacock family on the passing of our songbird. So, just to start this press conference, to say that it has been a long year last year for Barbadians. We expect that this year is going to be very rough and very tough. There is no point not speaking directly and forcefully to that. This is our first press conference for the year, and you can expect from the party that we will be having regular press conferences on a monthly basis going forward, addressing the issues, providing solutions, providing critique, and amplifying the voices of Barbadians in this year. Now, the theme really and what we're looking at today, we're looking at protecting our future. And the reason, and to protect our future, we kind of need to have a clear picture of where we are today and what we face so that relevant solutions and strategies can be devised. What we really face in Barbados is a prime minister who reminds me so much of Anansi, forever spinning a tale, but the reality is always so much different. And the reality is the Barbadian economy is struggling. Crime is not under control. The QH is in a mess. Education is in shambles. We have an absent prime minister, and really everything kind of seems out of control. But if you ever listen to the prime minister, you would think that you're living in a different country, in a whole alternative universe. So really, we want to get down to the issues. We want to set out clearly where Barbados is so that Barbadians can have an appreciation of what they will face and some of the solutions that will be required to dig us out of this very deep hole that we're in. Now, and we're going to start with the economy. The Barbados economy has struggled for growth under the Mia Mottley and the Barbados Labour Party-led administration. This has obviously been due to the ravages of COVID-19. You know, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge that, but really it's also been due really to the austerity measures imposed by the administration, because COVID-19 dictated a particular set of responses and all governments had choices. They chose a particular avenue. So you had the austerity measures imposed, and therefore the inability really of the government to conceptualize a growth strategy. There have been no growth-oriented policies coming from the government. And any keen and objective, and I always say this because any keen and objective observer would know that none of the projects the government has announced have come to fruition. And all the projects that the government are writing on are projects of the former Democratic Labour Party administration. And in fact, they've not even been able to complete them. So Sam Lars Castle is still not completed. You know, we kept a moving and a revolving date, and we still have to ask the question, when is the Hyatt going to start? So really, there has been nothing, if you're objective, that this government can point to as a project, a capital works project, a project to stimulate construction, to stimulate the economy, that they can point to that has been done. So really, all you have really is a borrowing spree, political projects, PR, and lots of borrowing. The World Bank is predicting that the Barbados economy will grow by 4.8% or so in this year. And the idea is that it will slow sharply from the 10% that was predicted in 2022. Now, the issues here, even if we are optimistic and we say, you know, that growth is going to happen, it does not spell good news for Barbadians. And I'll tell you the truth of this matter. No Anansi spinning tails as we get with this government. So after a 0.1% decline in 2019, a 14% decline in 2020, tepid growth in 2021, 1.4%, and then approximately supposedly 10% in 2022 and 4.8 in 2023 this year, will mean that 5 years, and I'm going to say this, 5 years after assuming office, the Barbados economy under the Barbados Labour Party will approximately be 1.6% larger than when they came to office. So in 5 years, they have grown the economy by 1.6%. 5 years, that's it. So that's basically negligible growth. Nothing has happened. So you have that period, the growth record of the Mia Mottley administration is dismal. Even when you factor in COVID and the responses to COVID, because the government likes to blame COVID for everything, it is still a dismal record that the government has on its shoulders. You had the fact that inflation in 2022 was up. Barbadians were forced to basically, some of them living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. Official inflation is up by 7.8%. What does this really mean for us in dollars and cents? The reality is we are now the 15th highest. We are in the top 20 of the highest gas prices in the world. That's right. You know, we pay more for gas than Switzerland, Italy, France. And think about this, Barbados is the only Caribbean country in that top 20. No other Caribbean country. So you're telling me that every other Caribbean country, they also went through COVID, they also had economic issues, but none of them have ended up in the top 20, and Barbados has. Therefore, that is telling us this is a result of government behavior and government responses. It is nothing just to simply do with COVID. Because when you look at our neighbors in Grenada, they're paying 90 cents US per liter for gas. St. Lucia, about $1.43 US. Bahamas, $1.50. Barbados, we are paying an average of $2 US per liter for gasoline. And this is what the global petrol prices.com reputable aggregator of these statistics are telling us. So Barbados is a very expensive destination. You know, like the juice has gone up from like $15 to $19. Pringles, you know, if you think anything, $7 to about $9, $10. The other day, someone told me a head of lettuce is for $22. She put it back in the supermarket. These are just the realities that people are facing. Oil last year was $12. Are we talking about $50? A packet, a box of chicken wings, and everybody like them chicken wings, including me, $45 a case, and we're not talking about $175. So when you see vendors on the side of the road putting up their prices in the small businesses that we frequent on Friday nights, you have to understand, you have to sympathize. They're not doing it because they're trying to jick out our eyes. The reality is a lot of these entrepreneurs, just as the households, are suffering. And you know, you have a situation where the government is spending something, and I want to get this right, $4 million a year on ministerial salaries. So you have a bunch of people who are out of touch with what the average Barbadian, in fact, not even average, what Barbadians are experiencing. And that $4 million is almost double, not almost, it is double what the previous administration spent on ministers, but we're not even getting half the results. If we got half the results, we'd be in a position we're not even getting half the results. The previous administration, when they borrowed, you could point to buildings, you could point to Batman and Golla, you could point to Bestos and Santos. There are things that were done. We can't even see where the money is going. So you're borrowing. There are no results. And that is a big part of the issues we're facing. And then you have the Prime Minister coming in some grand New Year message to tell us that we're all in this together and that she understands the pain. What pain? If you are getting $250,000, almost $250,000 a year in salary as a Prime Minister, Deputy, or Senior Minister, what pain can you understand with the average Barbadians? Nothing changes for you in your world. And added to that, we know that the compact is not going to re-engage this year. So people are facing gas prices are high, taxi prices have gone up, insurance rates have gone up. You know, if you were paying your house between $2,000 and $5,000 to insure it, which is probably about the average insurance for many Barbadians for their houses, now you're looking for another $200 to $500 per year to insure your house. That is serious amounts of money. That's money that you could be spending in the supermarket. That's money that you need to pay your bills. Add to that all the other things, you are looking almost at thousands of dollars per month in increases that people just cannot afford. So everything has gone up except salaries. Everything is up except salaries. So when we call last year for that 5 to 7% increase, I want to repeat it. It is important that the government increase salaries so that persons can at least have a cushion. What I would urge the government to do is resist this knee-jerk reaction and headline-grabbing measures and really focus on what is affecting Barbadians. The reality is Barbadians are concerned about cost of living. They're feeling it. They're concerned about public debt. At the moment, public debt is somewhat $13.7 billion. So effectively, and I want you to hear this and hear this carefully, effectively, we are back to the position that when the government assumed office. The reality is the debt restructuring and the debt write-off has not changed the position of Barbados. $2.4 billion in debt were written off by this government. And with all the pain and the havoc that was created in that debt restructuring process that in some ways was not necessary, what did it do? Created space for the government to do what? Borrow, 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 but with no results. Nobody's against borrowing, but when you borrow, you have to have something to show for it that we understand what our tax dollars are doing. So you have a government that is constantly borrowing, but with no ability to actually execute any projects. I've said this before, and I will say until the cows come home, till the black belly she come home, to whoever come home, this government is incompetent on a very, very large level. There is very good ability to tell a story, and nobody can tell a story like me and Motley. Let me tell you, nobody. But there is no competence at the core of this government, starting from the Prime Minister. And one of the things I want to wrap up here with, and I'm gonna throw this out. Our biggest money earner at the moment is compromised because we do not understand the data. And I'm asking, is it true that we are about 250,000 tourists less between where we were in 2019 to where we were at the end of 2022, because we have not been given official tourism statistics since October last year? And a lot of people don't realize that there have been no release of official tourism statistics on arrivals or spend. We have no clue right now where the industry is at the moment. But the reality is, we want to know if it is true that we are about 250,000 tourists down. And if we are, that means that we're down spend, that means that we're down on intakes, that means restaurants are affected, that means everybody is affected. But the reality is, we can see our neighbors in Grenada, and we don't want to talk about the reasons for that, but we can see our neighbors in Grenada winning every single tourist award. We can see our neighbors in St. Lucia and Antigua and Jamaica with their tourist arrivals and spend up in some ways by 4 to 5%, and we are nowhere near it. So it cannot just be COVID. There has to be some kind of competence ability. How are they doing it and we are not? And it's not even just one of them, so you can say it's like an accident or it's just some luck thing. St. Lucia, Grenada, Antigua, Jamaica, everybody's tourism is up. Barbados, the question is, are we 250,000 down less tourists? And the other thing to add to this is our international business sector. The mission critical of the Barbados Labour Party in 28, and they like to remind us of mission critical, so I can remind you of mission critical. They told us they're going to eliminate blacklisting. Since then, we've probably been blacklisted 4 or 5 times because there's so many you can't even keep track. 4 or 5 times we've been blacklisted. And if we continue, I suspect we will soon be blacklisted. Mark my words today, we will soon be blacklisted again. And this is where we are. We are with a government that is proven incompetent. We are with a government that is borrowing, spending, and taxing. And all we are asking for, and I will reiterate this, we've asked this before, my colleagues have asked this before, we need a growth strategy so that we can generate the revenues to pay for the things that we need to pay for. Because if we are not growing, the only thing this government will continue to do is borrow, tax, and spend. And I'll hand over to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, that's a lot to chew on. That's about half a newspaper, right? But in all seriousness, there's more, because we have some brains in this institution that we need to expose. And our next spokesperson will be Kimar Stewart, who will be given some more data to buttress what the president has just explained to you.
Good morning to all present. Good morning to all Barbadians. First, I'd like to thank you for being here. I'd like to follow on from the president of the party, Dr. Onyewood, and saying that this morning we're here to speak to you really in a very serious manner about issues in the daily living of Barbadians. As rightfully said, things are really out of control. And 2023 promises to be a year and all those persons such as the IMF, even the Prime Minister, and different financial institutions around the world have been predicting grim times that are supposed to face this country and many other countries around the world. So we require long-lasting economic policies that could cushion the impact that Barbadians can survive for the long haul. We focused a lot on jobs and job creation and job growth. High unemployment in Barbados continues to plague the government, and this administration can categorically state that they had a 0% job growth since 2018 in any sector. As the president said, capital works projects such as the Hayat continue to struggle. The senior minister for infrastructure, William Duguay, said that the issue was merely a financing issue. But since the government continues to borrow so much foreign debt, they could use some of that foreign debt, if necessary, to start the Hayat. This is too long now. The Prime Minister also promised the country that the Hayat was going to start since 2019, 2020. This is 2023. And we need some serious jobs and job growth happening in Barbados right now. I can categorically state to you that in 4 years, just simply 4 years, the Myanmar government has doubled and surpassed the amount of foreign debt that the Democratic Labour Party borrowed in 10 years. And that is a point that needs to be made, and I'm going to repeat it for you. The Myanmar administration borrowed more foreign debt in 4 years, doubled and surpassed than the Democratic Labour Party borrowed in 10 years. At the moment, this administration collected the highest levels of tax revenue ever in the history of any government, and the central bank's report can show the revenue levels of the government. One interesting point to note is that in 2018, the primary surplus was already at 3%, which shows that the Democratic Labour Party already started to implement reforms in terms of reducing deficits and the like. The current administration took that primary surplus to 6%, which showed that there was a doubling of revenues. And the governor of the central bank constantly mentions in his press releases that the government is benefiting from the inflation dividend, which shows that the government has a windfall of cash, but they're refusing to spend it to tackle the issues of Barbadians. When you look across the local financial sector, all of the programs that the government rolled out to raise money failed. BOSS failed, BOSS 2 had no success. The central bank bond, that failed as well. So this year, Mr. Ranchon came and said that we are not going to get back income tax. The last time they paid income tax, they used the same board money to pay that income tax. So why not now? Why are you attempting to raise money locally after you destroyed the market in the debt restructuring? Makes no sense to me. As we proceed, and following on from the president's point again about the tourism industry, we rolled out a BEST program for $300 million. So the government should come to the public and say how many hotels actually signed on to the program, how much money was disbursed in the BEST program, and how many preference shares the government now owns in these particular hotels. Because issues of the Auditor General's report continue to not be addressed in Barbados, and we need some transparency as it relates to how the monies of this government is being spent. We realize that there's a lack of accountability happening as it relates to the management and the financial processes of government, and the party requires some transparency and accountability for persons who campaign on such. So if you look at the garbage and the sewage tax, that has been a hard pill for Barbadians to swallow, really. Because persons today who are not connected to that sewage are still wondering why they have to pay a sewage tax after still not being connected to that sewage. Since the 1st of October, the government implemented the sewage tax. Unfortunately, there's no public document that we can reference to say how much the sewage tax actually made, only estimations. That occurs simply because the government redirected that sewage tax from the consolidated fund to be collected by the Barbados Water Authority, and the Water Authority would then pay it straight over to the sanitation. This creates a very opaque process. The consolidated fund is there for the people of Barbados to see where they can reference public funds and the way how they're being spent. But if you redirect it to a company whose financials are not up to date, what are we to think about that? So I am saying we need to address that, and I'm going to call on ICAB and the Bar Association to check into the legality of this process, because we need to know how much that service that actually made. Last point I'm going to make on that, it was only supposed to be temporary. This is 2023. I will go on to state that the pandemic levy is still very problematic. The pandemic is over now. So why are we paying a pandemic levy for a pandemic that is over? So, Mr. President, and the Democratic Labour Party suggests that you need to revisit that pandemic levy, and it needs to go. The pandemic is over, and you need to look for new sources of revenue outside of taxation. I wonder how visionary some are when we think that entering into a new IMF program in 2023 will save this country. And I wonder how visionary it is to lease out our Grant Adams International Airport for 40 years to an unknown company. And we still have not heard any more details really coming out from that process. Under the IMF program, the Prime Minister mentioned that state-owned enterprise reform is big on the ticket, along with pension and NAS reform. We have not heard anything really about the two, and we require some serious updates, because the leasing of an airport is a national security issue. And we have part of the issues right now as it relates to the importation of firearms and the like. So we need to have some serious discussion there. But I will soon wrap up in saying that we had a government minister who said on record that his government actually doubled the number of persons who are on welfare. For me, if you admit that your government's policies are making people poor, that is something that needs to be highlighted to the public. A serious discussion needs to be had, one with the minister and one for the persons who are implementing the policies to make the country poor. Because there's no way that he can say that 3,600 persons were on welfare and that we're at 6,000 now, and that just glaze one side. I think we need a more sustainable approach to how we manage our country. The people are broke, the people need income, and the cost of living crisis and the inflation crisis is really removing income and making it hard for people and tourists to live in Barbados. Unfortunately, those persons who live below the poverty line with no electricity or high arrears in electricity, no water or high arrears in water bills, and those persons whose roofs and houses are still exposed to the elements from the hurricanes and the ash, who still have not benefited from government expenditure to fix their housing programs. These persons need to be considered as they're the most vulnerable in our society, and the government needs to do more other than to bring the World Food Program truck to persons. We need a more sustainable approach, that type of governance. I think we need to do much better than that. I'll wrap up by saying that, unfortunately, with the impending pension reform, some of our pensioners may be disadvantaged. Persons may be asked to work to 72. Some persons may lose non-contributory pension, and it's really going to be difficult for persons who are looking forward to retiring. They now have to work from up to 40 years, from 33 and a half. Up to now, we have not heard much coming out from the government as it relates to that. The last update came from the Deputy Chairman, Rod Adams, saying that the government has the information. They have all of the reports, so it's up to them now to engage the public as to what the pension reform really will be about. So much 30 years later, from the time of Sir Lloyd Sandiford, we had similar issues, and now we are back here facing similar issues again with no solutions really. So my last and final point is that Barbados, our main foreign exchange earner, is about to achieve a second year of foreign exchange losses to the tune of $1 billion. Last year's current account deficit was 1 billion, and this year's was 1 billion as well, which indicates that we are going to, it's essential to find an earner for foreign exchange. The interest payments within Barbados, debt levels are also at $1 billion. So we are indeed in a debt trap, and the government must move immediately to address that problem. I will end by saying that any future administration elected between 2027 and 2037 will face a problem of external debt service, and we need to move now to address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kimar, for a very comprehensive explanation of many of the issues which we are not privy to receiving information, and also some people not understanding. Our next person will now move on to health, which is Mr. Gibson, because as we know, a healthy nation is a wealthy nation, and there are challenges there as well. So, Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I extend condolences to the Lee Cup family. I know them well, particularly brothers, and we certainly feel your loss. Barbados is waking up out of a very bad dream. There was the hope that things would get better under a Barbados Labour Party government. But I think that the reality is beginning to resonate and hit home to many Barbadians now that things are in a much worse position now that they are in government. The Democratic Labour Party, dear loving people, always focused on people. That has always been the ethos of this party. We have always looked at taking care of the education of Barbadians and the health. And I'm here to speak on health, particularly this morning. I want to bring attention to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the hacking and the malware situation that occurred at that institution. That occurred at the end of the year. And since the hacking or malware situation, because we really have not been informed as the people of Barbados as to what really happened, we have not been updated. We do not know how much of our personal information or medical records, whether if you have AIDS, herpes, whatever, it's probably out there somewhere. And no one is saying what has actually happened. It is a very sad position to be in, where our medical records, or X-ray records, or lab results have all been compromised in some way or fashion by a hacker. Now, there needs to be some accountability to the people of Barbados as to what transpired in that hack. It is time to tell us at the beginning of 2023, January the 13th, what is happening with that hack. Sufficient time has passed. We have given enough time. The Democratic Labour Party, of course, has been very empathetic because we believe it is evil to hack a hospital because you risk the compromise of the citizenry of Barbados. You compromise the care of children, and our family members are dear to our hearts. So we are totally against any hacking or anyone that would think we will never celebrate anything like that. It's nothing to celebrate. It's a very evil act. But what we do want as a party, know that we've had enough time. We did not come down hard on the government because we know that it is wrong what was done. But there is a need to be responsible and to give account to the people of Barbados as to what transpired in that hack. We also look at that in the light of the Trident ID card, because we are now being told that our driver's license, we are being told that our personal data and other fingerprints and so on could possibly go on, and a PIN number could go onto this Trident card. And if we are having a situation where our personal medical records are being hacked, I'd be very reticent to even have my Trident card not being properly protected going forward. It is a concern that many Barbadians have. We're getting calls as a party about it. People are up in arms and they're saying, look, If you cannot protect our medical records, we don't know how well you could protect our other personal data. So this is something that the government needs to put attention to and get serious about. This is not a joke. And not only that, there needs to be a mechanism where, and people always ask us, so what is the Democratic Labour Party going to do? By the way, we're not in government now, but we always give the solutions. And unfortunately, the government has an issue with implementation deficit, because every significant solution that we as a party have given to the government, they have attempted to do it and have done it poorly or not done it at all. They don't know how to do it. And it's very unfortunate. And so, because the whole issue of hacking is an ongoing process, there needs to be a team that is always ahead of those hackers, ahead of those malware specialists, and are always upfront in terms of getting ahead of the management of the personal data. I move now to a very sensitive area that is near and dear to many Barbadian hearts, and is that of the Accident and Emergency Department. We have a situation in Barbados where it is now taking 49 hours, between 48 and 49 hours in our Accident and Emergency Department to be seen. 48 to 49 hours to be seen. Now, there's something called an accident and there's something called emergency. And it is no longer an accident or an emergency when 24 hours have passed. And this is something that we have to be very mindful of. There needs to be more resources. And again, we're giving solutions to the problem. Let me give a little more of the problem first. You have a lot of 85-year-olds and 75-year-olds sitting in a waiting room, sometimes falling and collapsing on the ground in the A&E department, waiting to be seen by a doctor. And there's a reason why it is happening. There is a reason why it's happening. Now, the government spent a lot of millions of dollars creating a new mouth or entrance to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. They closed the old A&E department and opened the new one. The old A&E department was supposed to be fixed and renovated to expand the services in the department. So now what has happened is that we're operating on the new section of the A&E department and the old one is closed. In other words, we've gone back to the original position that we were in before. As a matter of fact, I almost believe that the A&E department has gotten smaller because they say they can't find enough money to open the second section, right, that they have closed down. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the government is finding money to build a Golden Square. They're finding money to build a Heroes Park, but they mean they can't even find money to build or repair the second part of the A&E department. It is heartbreaking that the government can find money to fly and to stay in luxurious hotels in Egypt, in South Africa, and speak at Nelson Mandela Foundation and carry a large 24 people to these functions and spend millions of dollars or large swaths of money and can't find enough money to fix something as fundamental as a hospital. This speaks then to the loss of life, the loss of health by many Barbadians, and probably complicating and giving a higher secondary healthcare costs to our government, which they don't have. They don't have the money to spend, but they're creating a situation where people are getting sicker and the government is spending more money to take care of persons. This is an issue, especially in light of the fact that, as Comrade Kimar Stewart just mentioned, there is still, this is January 13th, 2023, and we're still collecting a pandemic levy. We're still collecting that levy. We're still collecting a health levy. And still, our health is going down the drain. It's getting worse and worse and worse. Sometimes you have as many as over 60 to 80 persons sitting in an A&E department waiting 48 hours to be seen. It is not good at all. And I want us to add that the issue of our elderly is becoming a major concern, particularly in that environment. A lot of persons are now, things are so hard and so rough in the country that persons are choosing to leave their mothers at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital because they think that that's the only thing they can do to help their parents, because they can't afford a light bill, they can't afford food, the water bill has gone up, the pension is going up, the cost of living is going up, food is ridiculously high. And one of the things that people must be mindful of, when you've been given your pension and all of the surrounding costs and taxes and everything and VAT and everything keeps going up and up and up and up, our hard-working hewers of wood and carriers of water that would have built this country, that would have given the best years of their life to building this Barbados, are now left to the fringes because no one is thinking about the elderly. The fact that they're not thinking of whether those people can eat, whether they can afford water, are they able to clean themselves? Because when you can't pay a water bill, your water gets cut off. And this is what is happening, and this is the experience of a lot of Barbadians happening at this time. And so we, the Democratic Labour Party, we are bringing attention to this. It wasn't like this when we were in government. People were working, people were employed, people were able to pay their bills, houses were built. And the reality is that the quality of life was very, very different. We had a much lower unemployment rate. The unemployment rate right now is through the roof. So we have to make sure that we get this thing right. And we're calling on the government to get their act together or get out. I want to end by asking for a clearer role to be identified for our polyclinics. If the polyclinics are dealt with in an adequate way and are funded and staffed, they would be able to decompress the challenges that we're seeing at the accident and emergency department. That decompression is necessary because that you're not supposed to be going to everything at a hospital, which is a tertiary healthcare institution. That's why you have a secondary healthcare system called a polyclinic. And the aim is to decompress the intensity and the weight of health at the QEH. Now, I want to end by saying this, and this is the most critical part. Well, it's part of the whole. When you have a hospital that's only seeing people in 48 hours, when you have a hospital that is understaffed with less that requires 250 nurses, that they're understaffed by 250 nurses. When you have doctors that are working double shifts and double hours to push and to see patients, you have a situation of compression. You have a stressful situation. And I have personally heard it said by many doctors, and I want to thank the doctors, the nurses, the pharmacists, and the medical personnel and the cleaners of the hospital and so on, because they are very important too. They are keeping this thing afloat while the government puts no resources behind it. Mm-hmm. These people are keeping the bandages on and keeping things going. Enough is enough. We need to take that pressure off of the staff. I've heard a doctor say that when they go into the private sector and work, it is 1,000 times easier. And they were being generous. They said 1,000 times. They're going to say 1,000,000 times easier to work in the private sector than to work in the hospital. And you can imagine the nurses and the staff members under that type of pressure. So the Democratic Labour Party is calling for the government to revisit this, to relook at the staffing of the hospital, to relook at the retooling of the hospital, and to look at getting the polyclinic sectors up and running efficiently again for Barbadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Melissa? And Melissa will be focusing directly on education.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, as usual. And I can just dive right in because there are a number of critical issues that continue to plague our education system and continue to hurt our children. And one of the first things that I've been getting calls all this week asking me about was the grooming policy, the new grooming policy that came out the night before school started. And I was like, school tomorrow? Because I was a bit confused as to when school was started, because it shows the complete incompetence of the minister. Did the chief education officer have to tap her and remind her tomorrow school starting? So let's get this thing out. Why would we wait the night before school starts to send out something like that when parents had already prepped their children? Parents would have already taken their sons to the barber and gotten their hair cut. Even if they had braids over the holiday or had their hair plait over the holiday, the girls would have already plait their hair the night before and try to make themselves neat and tidy, because these are the words that are coming out all the time. Once it's neat and tidy, but again, neat and tidy is something that is subjective. What's neat and tidy for me might not be neat and tidy for you. So we need to be more clear about what these rules really are. So I agree that a new policy is needed and necessary given the diversity of our society, but being vague is somewhat confusing, especially for the administrators and the teachers, over what is acceptable and what is not. Also, it is understood that, as usual, our teachers were left in the dark to only find out, like everybody else, about these new grooming policies in some of our schools. Once again, the ministry continues to show a lack of respect for teachers, a lack of respect for parents, and a lack of respect in general. They need to continue to empower. We need to empower our parents, empower our teachers to do what they need to do. And empowering them is having consultation with them, saying to the teachers, this is what we have in mind. So can this work? How will this affect you? How will this affect school? How will this affect our students? And is it that they don't want to empower, or they just don't know how to empower? And let's not forget the travesty of the IDB survey. Was this just smoke and mirrors to hide up? You know what? Let's give them something else to focus on. Let's focus on the new policy. If we have something else to focus on, then they don't have time to remember the critical issues that are currently plaguing our system. Or again, is this another hot and sweaty approach? Because as we know, this government is known for hot and sweaty. So let's get this done quickly, and not hear, again, the issues that continue to plague our children. And one of the other issues that we have out there that are affecting our schools is principals. We have so many acting principals and deputy principals currently in our system. Why is that happening? Is this instability that we have right now, is this because of the lack of confidence that the Ministry of Education is showing in our teachers? Why is this happening? The ministry needs to show some kind of confidence in the leadership. The tone is set from the top. If they can't set that tone, then how is it being filtered down to the schools? That tone needs to be set at top. More than 50% of our principals and deputy principals are currently acting. And the same thing applies in our primary schools. Then in some cases, we are playing musical chairs. So the music starts, it stops, and you catch a seat, sit down in one, because this is what's happening. Why are we playing musical chairs with our educational system? Today you get up and you hear you're going to a different school. You know, we need to stop this. We need to have something, a framework. How are the principals being chosen? School leaders should be properly chosen and empowered and allowed to do the job in which they were placed in to do, instead of the current micromanaging that is happening within our schools. Now, since that we are on that topic of schools and principals, it should be noted that our taxpayer dollars continue to be spent twice. It's being mismanaged, yeah, but we know that already. It's being mismanaged, but it's being spent twice within the school system. How is that? We are paying principals and teachers to be principals and teachers, but they don't have any jobs. So they're currently working from home, doing nothing, and then we're paying teachers and principals to work within the schools. Teachers are currently on suspension. We have principals on suspension, and they're being paid their full salaries. To do what? Give them their day. Give them the day, be it in court, be it in meetings. Give them their day, and then determine what is going to happen with these persons. It doesn't make sense keeping them out there in the wilderness. Some teachers are out there 2, 3, 4, 5 years on suspension. For what? When are they going to get their hearing? These things need to be addressed and dealt with. They've been outstanding for too long. Then we were here, we don't have any money. When there are resources needed within the schools to make sure that schools can function properly, you hear, there's no money. But there can't be any money if you're paying people to do jobs that they aren't doing and then paying somebody now to do the actual jobs. It doesn't make any sense. The law is clear that if a teacher is suspected of doing wrong, then there's a set amount of time within which that charge should be laid. So again, these teachers on suspension, the time is passing. If you have not laid any charges against these teachers or principals, get them back to work. Make a decision, hard or soft, and get them back to work. Now, our next issue we have as we continue to have our issues within the schools, the environmental issues and the school plans. A number of schools in our country needs repairs, maintenance. This is 5 years and not one new school has been built in Barbados. We have the LTG situation. It should be easy to make a decision. What are we going to do with that school? Is it just going to stay there? We're going to just keep shuttling children each day to different satellite points? Who's paying for this shuttle? Because it can't be the parents. So somebody who's paying to pick up these children each day and take them to 3 different locations. These things need to be addressed. But it seems like a bit of deja vu to me, because didn't this happen before with the same Blue Link situation? Who was the government back then? Let's ask those questions. Where is the report from the same LTG? There's none. Where is it? If there's one, please produce it. Let us know what is happening so that an informed decision can be made what to do with these schools. We keep hearing too about the 11 plus. I was reading the papers and I saw the 11 plus meetings have started back since January 5th. And then I went back and said, but in the DLP manifesto, the promise that the 11 plus would be abolished. I ain't saying that's what I want, but I'm saying, have any meetings been held to determine what is happening with the 11 plus? Are we going to put children back through this whole, put parents back through this whole situation where we're having all these meetings and preparing them, and then we come 2 weeks or 3 weeks before 11 plus and say, oh, we're thinking about abolishing it again, and then according to my grandmother, be spinning top in mud over and over and over and hearing the same thing and nothing is happening. We need to figure out what is happening. We also have an education reform committee that is out there. And again, spinning top in mud, you're just hearing about this committee. Is it, again, smoke and mirrors? Is there an actual committee that is out there doing something? Or again, we're just paying people. We don't have any money, but we're borrowing all the time. But we're paying people to do what? To just sit on committees? I need to sit on a committee where I can be paid. Minister, please do your job. Make some decisions. Stand up and make some decisions, hard or soft, and stand by the decisions that you made. And the issue of violence, again, we just put out a new grooming policy. Where is the policy on violence? Did we have any meeting with teachers over the holidays to say, this is how we're going to address these issues? So the violence continues, all the issues continues, and nothing. And for me, I'm solution oriented. So I try to decide, okay, what solutions are best. And in looking at this, I'm thinking we need to have a list of how many principals, and they should already have these lists though. So what I'm thinking about is things that should already be in place. A list of how many principals and in primary schools and secondary schools are acting and who are qualified to do the job. And we also need to look at the qualification order, because a lot of teachers and principals, a lot of teachers out there may be qualified to do the job in years of experience and knowledge, but because they don't have that paper, that may be able to stop them from getting the job. So we need to look at that qualification order again. And we need to stop shuffling the teachers from school to school, because that keeps the system unstable. We need to stabilize the system by having one person there, and if that person is not good enough, move them. But have one person there who can control the school and who can make things happen within the schools. So that's it on my behalf. Again, we asking the Minister of Education, please do your job. Come out, let us know what's happening with the school plants, how you plan to repair the plants and make sure that they're safe for our children, how you plan to engage with the parents and with teachers and with all stakeholders within the schools to make sure that we have a proper functioning system and to make sure that these teachers who are out there acting, that they're appointed, no appointments or interviews have been done since 2015. These are issues that need to be addressed and need to be handled. So thanks again. We look forward to hearing more from the ministry as to how they're going to address all these issues. Back over to you, Madam Chair.
All right, thanks very much, Melissa. Are there any questions? I'm going straight through. Can you use the microphone, please?
Right. Yes. Hi, morning. Carville Munzi from Nation News. Just a few questions from me. I want to start with a point that the president would have raised about possibly a suggestion, rather, of a 5% increase in wages, 5 to 7% increase in wages. Obviously, we are going through a second IMF program. There are conditionalities which must be kept, among which would be a surplus, primary surplus, incremental primary surplus starting at 2% or onward. How realistic do you see this suggestion being under those conditions? And would you whether or not you agree with the IMF program or not, we are currently in it. How realistic do you see such a suggestion?
All right. I wouldn't have made the suggestion if it wasn't. My economic team has looked at the numbers, and actually, after crunching numbers, recognize that between 5 and 7% is reasonable and doable. Anything outside of that would definitely compromise the economy and compromise our ability in the program. So it is up to the government to make the appropriate increases, but it goes back to what I think Comrade Kimar and Comrade Paul and Melissa are emphasizing. It's a matter of choices. All governments have choices, and you decide what your priorities are. Right now, the government of Barbados is telling Barbadian workers and telling Barbadians, you are not our priority. Giving you additional money so you can get through your life and live in a kind of decent standard of living to take care of your family and live your life in dignity. They are telling Barbadians that is not the priority for the government of Barbados. Their priorities are elsewhere, whether it is fancy monuments, whether it's flying hither, dither, and thither, whatever it is. But the reality is, and I think Carville, you know this, I think everyone knows this, governments have choices. You can choose to spend it there. You can choose to spend it there. If you borrow for particular reasons. You borrow for investment purposes so that there's a return on that borrowing. At the moment, we know the government has the current account deficit, as Kimar mentioned, $1 billion. We know that the government actually is estimated will spend, therefore, basically more money than it will collect. How do we close that? How do we then adjust to the inflations that people are going through? And the reality is all of these things are choices. I called for this pay increase last year, and we've had zero response from the government. We are hoping that the government understands that Barbadians are its priority, and it would make this 5 to 7. As I said, we even provided a range. I provided the range because my team, we did the homework. This is reasonable and doable.
Could you expound on that, Mr. President? When you said doable, I mean, what would have to be juggled? What would have to be moved around to make that doable? As I said, given the context that you yourself would have painted.
Well, there's one thing here. We are here to suggest the solutions. We're here to help and set out ways, but I'm not the government. At the moment, we've also even made it clear that we can't see all of the books. We are working on the information that we have. The government needs to come and tell us, transparent, how it's able to do that. And we expect that sometime soon, they will make an announcement on it because it is pressing.
Just to respond to some of your queries, we know that the writing is really on the wall as it relates to further expenditure cuts in government. We know that the writing is on the wall really when it comes to expenditure cuts in government. However, being under the IMF program, it gives you room for fiscal space. So if we continue to run the surplus and the government continues to cut and trim and gets the government to a more lean stage, then there's room to give a wage increase. On top of that, the former administration made an offer for public servants' wages, which was double what the current administration offered and what was accepted by the unions. So there's additional room based off what was offered by the last government to give public servants a wage increase, and it's still being within a reasonable economic frame.
I don't know if any one of my other media colleagues have any questions, but I could continue if they don't. Okay,
Happy New Year to you too, Carver. It is such a pleasure to see you, as always.
Ryan Broom, CBC. Just to continue on Carver's point, I know you're in terms of the range that you're putting the 5 to 7. There are also factors such as external shocks, that things unforeseen that you're not able to factor in, war in Ukraine and natural disasters, etc. Is it therefore safe to go with a range like that, knowing the environment that we're in? You said before that COVID is over. We aren't really, it's not really over. I've heard that said. We see what happened in China. So, I mean, do you really factor in? I think an increase is possible. As far as I know, I spoke to the NUPW recently, and they said that the talks, they had sent correspondence for the talks to resume, and they're still hoping for those talks to be resume. By the end of this month. I don't know if that will happen, but is it realistic to put a figure to something like that, given all of the factors that are in play, and considering that you may make a decision or say you will go with X now, and then next month something else happens that causes the situation to go on its head?
Well, on the side.
Wait, two seconds, come on. Look, the reality is you have to have some target by which you're operating. Governments function within crises all the time. The Democratic Labour Party was facing the worst financial crisis that Barbados ever faced when you have the global meltdown, and still managed to build schools, build Besto Santos, and do other things. I find sometimes, and this is not to be disparaging of colleagues in the media or other folks, that you seem to give passes to the government. Oh, it's in a crisis, so this can't happen. I'm like, well, you know what? That's life. Every day something happens. Your job as government is to respond to them effectively. If we say 5 to 7 is reasonable, but something happens, you realize, okay, can't do 5 to 7. You come and say, I can do 4. Okay, and then you explain. That is your job, but you cannot contain yourself to say we will not act because there's a war in Ukraine. There's always something. There was a war in Iraq back in the day. There's always something. When Barrow and the first DLP government established broad free education and a broad free service health point, there were things going on. We just we just became independent. Unless we had no money. There's always something going on. That's why I come back to priorities. What are your priorities? Are your priorities healthcare for the elderly and for people of Barbados? Are your priorities the children of Barbados? Are your priorities trying to grow the economy of Barbados? And when you set out the parameters of those, then you can act within them. You can literally easily go, well, actually, there's this going on, there's that going on. I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that. And we have to start giving the government passes. COVID happened, as I explained, in every other country in the Caribbean. So let me ask you the question, why is every other tourism economy in the Caribbean growing and tourist arrivals are up, but our tourist arrivals are literally about, as I understand, I want them to tell us if it's true, half of what they were in 2019 to where we are today. There has to be a reason. And you just can't blame COVID the one you're at. How is Grenada doing well? Why is Grenada, and I'm gonna use Grenada, why is Grenada doing well? And St. Lucia and Antigua and Jamaica, and we are not. So it can't just be the external shocks. We have to control, and we have control over our environment. It just can't, everything's external, so we can throw up our hands and say it's all external. We can't do anything. And that's often the excuse for the government. And then all of a sudden, when they want to do something, yes, we are government, and governments must act. That's what you hear. So you know what? If governments must act, do something. Do something.
I don't know if I go again that conversation about giving government passes. What I would want to ask though is
Ryan, before you, I just want to follow up.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to follow up on what the president was saying. Unfortunately, Barbados, we do not produce much that we could sell to the world. So therefore, if you don't look at increments like public service, increases in terms of the wages, our people are our only resource. So we have there's something called the Boomal effect. And our former Prime Minister Owen Alpha spoke about it, where people are your biggest resource. And the public service is indeed a large employer of people in Barbados. And the public service drives serious economic activity in the country. However, they have been going through an internal devaluation of their income due to government cutting a lot of the social benefits under the IMF program. So if you find a way to increase the income to public servants, it can drive economic activity. So I see it as possible.
Okay. Just to go back, again, I want to get back to what you said in a second, but first to say that if there are no figures, tourist arrivals figures, as you say, what's your basis for saying that we're at half?
No. You can say there are no figures. I've said there are no figures that have been released since October. I have asked, is it true that we are currently in this state? Now, therefore, the government will have to come and tell the people of Barbados where we are in terms of tourist arrivals. My question was, is it true that we are down literally by half the tourist arrivals that we would have had normally in 2019 to where we are now, where we were at the end of 2022? Because we've not seen the official figures, but I'm simply asking the question.
We've not seen the official figures since October, which is significant.
Yeah.
And nobody in the media has asked a question. Every single year you get quarterly reports on the progress of tourism. Tourism is our main foreign exchange earner, and nobody missed the figures, nobody asked the question, and the government has effectively stifled the information because it's a state-owned entity. So where are the numbers?
Yep.
I have a two-pronged question.
Yeah, go for it.
I guess Kimar can answer part and you can answer the other part. Basically, you had raised a point about the fiscal space that are being created within the context of the IMF program. But my understanding, that fiscal space has been created for capital work expansion, etc. And then you not necessarily want. I don't foresee borrowing to pay public sector wages as a plan of sorts. Secondly, the other question, you could respond to that, Kimar, but the second question would be in terms of the lenses to which you see the current trajectory of government's revenue raising measures. We are currently going through the estimate exercise at this point. Do you predict as a party further pain for Barbadian people in terms of additional taxes to raise revenue.
Kimar, you answer the first, now answer the second.
Right. However, I don't think we are suggesting to borrow to pay public sector wages. What we're saying is we need ways to earn that revenue outside of taxation. Right? So we're not suggesting that we're going to borrow or print money for public service increases. Unfortunately, Colville, the capital expenditures of the IMF program have not been increasing significantly. We were promised $2 billion in a stimulus package during COVID. But when you check the amounts that were allocated to capital expenditures, they were measly. They didn't go over $500 million at any point in time. So if you're seeking to bring capital works projects to the economy, you could borrow for capital works projects. Right? This is why we suggested that if you're serious about the Hayat, you could finance the Hayat through some borrowing of the US money that we borrowed internationally. But just to reiterate, we are not suggesting to, by borrowing or printing, to increase the wages, but more earning the revenue, which would keep the government within its primary surplus and give it scope not to incur additional debt in terms of future advances or projects.
What I will do, Carl, I will share a small table with you and the media, setting out the estimates, revised estimates, where in terms of the foreign project financing and the list of the loans, of which the IDB 200 million was part of it. Because what I think a lot of folks didn't pick up is that these loans that we're now seeing making headlines were in the estimates. And if we hadn't received those loans, basically Barbados could not be functioning. Though that if you didn't get that IDB loan, that World Bank loan, those IMF loans, we would be in so much trouble, right? We wouldn't even know where to look. So what was missed is that the government really built the estimates on borrowing. There was no earning or projection of how we are going to get tourism back on its feet. There was no how we are going to get the marijuana industry that they talk about all the time off of the ground. Literally, when you really dig into the estimates, you have factored in borrowing as your main driver. I'll share the table with you so you get a sense of the numbers I'm talking about. And on top of that, we are still down by about $1 billion. They're still spending over $1 billion that we're not accounting for, and we need to definitely account for that. But the point I think that Kimar was making is a very good one, and one that we don't realize. Public sector can be a driver of productivity, and we recognize that when the public sector is not working, the country also is not working. There key elements that the government drives, whether it is in registration processes, whatever, that are essential to the lifeline of the Barbados economy. They're essential to the business sector, and we have to get the productivity up. We have to get persons being able to live better lives through combating inflation. All of these things kind of have to happen simultaneously. Right now, what we're getting from the government is a lot of spinning of tails. And as we said today, we are just trying to lay out this picture as clear as possible for Barbadians so they understand what we face. And from that, then we can start looking at a way forward from all of this.
But I think the second question I asked still wasn't quite answered. Based on your analysis, are you foreseeing for the revenue raising measures this year, taxes, etc.? What are you foreseeing?
I am not in the business of fortune telling. I am not in the business of telling stories. I like the Prime Minister. I am not in the business of spinning tails. What I will say is that we will wait to see what the government's estimates are. And what I'm going to put forward, and you kind of beat me to it, I am proposing that we will have right before and during the estimates, we're going to propose an economic forum where we will discuss and divulge the estimates. And I want to now issue a call to all interested Barbadians, all stakeholders, to participate in that forum once the estimates process gets going, so that we can have that robust discussion about the estimates that truly has been missing for a number of years, because obviously there's not that robust debate that you get inside of Parliament. So we're going to have to find a way to create that debate and that discussion out of Parliament.
Final question from me. Based on the gist of what I'm gathering from this press conference this morning, is that 1 year after the Mia Moore-Motley administration would have been elected in 2022, you would have pretty much given them a failing grade in their performance thus far. However, if we look internally at this point, I'm talking within the scope of the Democratic Labour Party, the person that is doing the grading, you must also be speaking from a position of strength. Now, you pretty much would have promised a wiping of the slate and a rebuilding of the party. Could you give us an update at this point as to how that is going? What type of candidacy have come forward to strengthen the position of basically the second party?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. And I would say, Carver, we've given them a failing grade on some things, but this party is a fair party, and it doesn't mean that there are not some projects and some things that the government may have gotten right along the process. I remember, I think it was you that asked me this question, what I thought, or it was somebody else that asked me what I thought they've done well and what they've been doing well. And I would say that the government has been doing well and being climate change advocates, and that is something that we have to acknowledge. So perhaps on that we can give them a B+ or A-. On the other things, we can we can continue with the F. Now, in terms of where we are as a party in the rebuild of this project, and to continue not only the legacy, but to reinvigorate the legacy as a party of social justice and a party that is trying to be the sphere of fairness, and to look at issues of income distribution and to create that society where we can all share in the spoils of Barbados, not a family and friends government, but one that is for all Barbadians. Where are we on that project? We are working tremendously hard. This has been about 6 months since my presidency. I am proud to say that we have managed to stabilize the top end of the party with our general secretary and the secretariat functioning excellently. I offer them publicly my praise and my endorsement, and I thank them for their service to this party. Every day we have folks who are turning up, staffing this party and the secretariat, who are not paid, and they do it because not simply they love this party, they love this country, because they want to see this party succeed so that this country can succeed. So on that level, that is going well. When it comes to candidate selection, that process, as I mentioned last year, made the point that all seats were vacant, because that is just in general nature of what happens after the election. And then I will unveil a candidate selection process in the coming months. So that process is coming along sweepingly as well. And overall, we want to thank the members, we want to thank the supporters, we want to thank Barbadians for continuing to have faith in us and to give us a chance as we rebuild. There's no point hiding from it. 2 devastating losses on any institution is a lot to take. And the fact that the Democratic Labour Party is still here, standing, trying, pushing, the fact we're even holding this press conference to critique a government in this forensic way tells you there is strength that is deep, that is almost spiritual about this party. And we can only thank the members, its supporters, for all they do to ensure that this party remains a voice for the people of Barbados. And not only for the people of Barbados, we have to remember this party has also been at the cornerstone of the foundation and the formation of Caribbean and CARICOM. As we celebrate 50 years of that, and we celebrate 75 years of UE, this party was there
the Minister in crime prevention. He had a tour of the port recently, and he made some comments. Some strides were being made. So just want to hear your comments in terms of how you think the government is handling the crime situation.
Okay. Now, where do we begin with Mr. Corey Lane as a crime? I don't even know what it is. A crime stopper, a crime prevention officer. I am unsure, because the appointment of Corey Lane must surely worry Mr. Dale Marshall as Attorney General, because one, not only have you appointed a non-lawyer, you've appointed a non-trained criminal. How do you appoint Corey Lane as your principal crime stopper or your principal agent to address crime when you already have an Attorney General? That is the job of the Attorney General. So if I were Mr. Dale Marshall, I would be having one eye over the left and one eye over the right shoulder, because I would definitely be worried that my position in cabinet was only by title. Now, in terms of the effectiveness of Mr. Corey Lane, and I'm glad you mentioned the issue with the port, he has proven how incompetent he is and that he does not understand national security. How do you go on talking about all the security measures that you have put in place? You have literally told the criminals how to avoid everything that you're putting in place to stop the criminals. That goes to show that no basic understanding. His answer should be, we do not discuss security measures. Literally, the guy listed every single camera, every measure. You know, we were all watching with our faces dropped. Like, is this serious? Is this the man that has been tasked with stopping crime? And on top of that, then he made some bogus statement about how there have been gang reductions, and they've talked to the gangs, and they're providing them with sums of money to stop being involved in gangs. And then the next day there's another shooting. So what are you talking about? And on top of that, what kind of society are you building when you are I guess, trying to pay? Are we paying protection money? Is that where the government's being reduced to when it comes to crime? How long will this program continue? Is it sustainable? These are serious, serious questions. What is Mr. Corey Lane actually doing on a day-to-day basis when it comes to crime reduction in Barbados? Obviously, from the effects of what we're seeing, it is not working. This party, we set out a serious approach last year. I can't remember the time. We offered to sit with the Attorney General. We said what needed to be done. We told them to bring all the parties together, the interested parties, the stakeholders, the community groups, the churches, everybody, get them in a room, knock some heads together, and address the causes of crime. You have to be tough on the causes of crime, get into the homes, get into the societies where it's occurring. We know the families at risk. We know the marginal groups. Deal with those, and then you have to be tough on crime. So it has to be that two-pronged approach. We set this out, we were clear in the offer, and nothing has happened. So here we are in a situation, sadly, where by the government's own incompetence and its own hubris, crime is not being addressed. And I'll just say that this is not the politicized crime, because people often say that, oh, you don't bring politics into crime, you don't bring politics into this. You know what? Politics isn't everything. And when I say politics, I don't mean partisan politics. I just mean the ability of us to govern and manage our systems. So anything I say today, it's not being political. It's just the reality of what we face, and we need to create a safe society for all Barbadians and for investors, because let's be realistic. We depend as a society on tourism and foreign investment, and we need a safe society to facilitate that. And we, as Barbadians, first and foremost, also need to feel safe when we're going about in our country.
Any more questions? Be very quiet. All right. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Before I close, I would just like to give you a preview of some of our Arrowbarrow week of activities, because remember, the 21st of January is Arrowbarrow Day. So we will be starting as usual with a church service. On Sunday, January 15th, at New Dimensions Ministries in Barbers Hill, and that church service begins at 8:30. We will also be having an event here on Thursday, the 19th of January. We call it the Memorial Wall Ceremony. If you step outside, you will see that we have a memorial wall out there, and we will be adding some names to that wall. That wall carries the names of some of our fallen comrades. So it will be a tribute ceremony to our fallen comrades. On Saturday, 21st, there's going to be a big domino activity in St. John, starting at noon at the Penalty Sports Bar in Carter's, St. John. And that's on the Saturday. And then the major event of these celebrations will be the Errol Barrow Memorial Lecture, which will be given by the Right Honorable Philip Jean-Pierre, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And that date is on Friday, the 20th of January. And the lecture starts at 7 p.m., again at the Errol Barrow Theatre at UWI, the Errol Barrow Center for Creative Imagination at the University of the West Indies at 7 p.m. The Prime Minister of St. Lucia will address Barbados. And with that, I thank you again for coming out to this first press conference. You will be, as the President said, be invited to many more, and we hope to see all of you at the other ones that we will be having. So travel safely and have a wonderful day.